I've got all the newest info on Netflix's The Toys That Made Us directly from the creator himself, and I'm going to share that with you guys right now. What up to my peoples? Welcome back to Retro Crunch, your nostalgia show that's all about current pop culture, movies, music, and games that relates to all things 70s, 80s, and 90s. If you love toys and are a fan of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you're going to love today's topic. We're going to give you all the newest info on Netflix's new show, The Toys That Made Us, that's coming out December 22nd. I just had a one-on-one interview this week with the creator of the show, Mr. Brian Volk-Weiss, and he was very candid with Retro Crunch about a lot of new information regarding the show, and you're going to hear it here first. So first off, if you're not familiar with Brian, he is the president of Comedy Dynamics, which is currently the largest producer and distributor of one-hour comedy specials in the United States, with specials like Kevin Hart, Jim Gaffigan, Bill Burr, and tons others. Well, one of Brian's true loves is toys and collectibles. And The Toys That Made Us is a passion project that he has been developing and trying to sell for 5 years. This Netflix show was his chance not only to relive some of his childhood memories, but a way to give back to the toy-loving community as well. The Toys That Made Us is a Netflix documentary series that tells the story of 8 iconic and popular toys. It dives into each toy's creation, fan base, creative teams, and TV stars to give the viewer a glimpse into what made these toys the toys that made us. And at the start of the interview, I first asked Brian where he got the idea for the documentary series titled The Toys That Made Us, and he had this to say. I'm a huge collector, and before I was a collector, I played with the toys. And I always say that I would have been a dentist or a lawyer if it wasn't for Star Wars. The only reason that I am in LA now is because of Star Wars. Star Wars made me. I would be a different person without it. You ask kids like some without grandparents or parents, and they might say something like, Optimus Prime was a father figure to me. So we got to thinking about it, and it just made sense that the toys that we grew up with made us who we are today. We just thought it fit. I did confirm with Brian what the episodes are and the order that they will appear. And on December 22nd, Netflix will be dropping the first 4 episodes in this order. Star Wars, G.I. Joe, Barbie, and He-Man. And sometime in 2018, the next 4 episodes of the first season will be released, which are Transformers, Star Trek, Hello Kitty, and Lego in that order. They haven't locked down a date yet though. Then we started talking about the series as a whole, and he let me know that each episode is going to be less than an hour long. But the shortest will be about 42 minutes in length, and the longest episode will come in at about 55 minutes. Brian also gave me some insight on why the 8 toy lines were picked out of all the toys that were popular in the 80s. And he explained that there were 3 criteria that they looked for when they decided on the 8 toy lines that the show would cover. So number 1 was that the toy had to essentially be in production non-stop. So every toy that we've done has never stopped being in production, from the toy's beginning all the way up to when we finished production on the show. Number 2, the toys had to have a huge, rabid fan base with lots of passion and excitement for them. And number 3, we had to have access to the creators. When asked why we chose to go with Star Wars for the first episode, Brian told me, of all the toys I covered, the one toy that I would say that I could have a PhD in was Star Wars. And the one thing about Star Wars is it was the most successful toy line of all time, so we tackled that first. Once we had Star Wars figured out and locked down, we applied that same outline to the other 7. I asked him if they had plans for a season 2, and he told me, I have plans in my head for a season 2. Netflix wants to see how season 1 does before doing a season 2 though, but we do know what we want to do for the second season if we do get the green light. Brian had mentioned in our emails that they did interviews with Peter Cullen and Dolph Lundgren. So I asked if there are other actors or specific people interviewed that he'd be okay with telling us about. He told me, we interviewed Michael Bay and that was awesome. But the show is not really about the movies or the TV shows. But the He-Man movie is such an important part of the He-Man story, and Peter Cullen is obviously a huge part of Transformers. And it's arguable that without that voice, Transformers might not have been able to beat GoBots. When I asked Brian more pointed questions about the series outline, he let me know that the show is not focused on collecting or collectors. It focuses on the history of the toy lines. And even though the show concentrates on the popularity of the toy lines from the 80s, he had to go over the backstory of each toy line's creation from the beginning all the way up to current day. Brian told me that they've even added noteworthy information to a series that happened as late as last week. So even though the show is finished, it looks like they are trying to stay as thorough as possible. And from what I was told, it looks like the series will be a great history lesson on each of these toy lines, as well as giving the 80s fans a huge nostalgia rush at the same time. We had a pretty long talk, and a lot of it didn't directly relate to the show, so I don't want to go into that in this episode, but I may save it for a future video. So to recap all the new things that we learned about the show, Brian explained where he got the idea for the title, The Toys That Made Us. The show is going to be 8 episodes, with the first 4 all dropping on December 22nd. Star Wars will be episode 1, with G.I. Joe, Barbie, and He-Man to follow. And in 2018, we will see Transformers, Star Trek, Hello Kitty, and Lego. Brian also explained why he chose Star Wars as the first episode. And the episodes will be between 42 and 55 minutes in length. The series is about the entire history of the 8 toy lines, but it will concentrate on the 1980s and 90s. And Brian explained the 3 criteria that his team used to determine what toy line would be featured, which were a huge fan base, the toys have to have been in production continuously since inception, and the creators had to be available. We also learned that Season 2 has not been greenlit yet. And finally, I learned that Brian Volk-Weiss is a pretty fun guy. So there you have it, Retroheads. The Toys That Made Us will be available on Netflix starting December 22nd. And I hope that my interview with Brian, the creator of the show, gave you a little more concrete info on what to expect. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Retro Crunch, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more great retro news every week. And remember, if it ain't retro, it ain't worth watching.